I never thought my life would change with just one sentence. Get out. And don't come back. My father's voice was like a hammer driving the final nail into the coffin of my childhood. His face was hard, ice cold, and there wasn't a single hint of hesitation in his expression. It was like I was a stain on his perfect life, something to be erased, forgotten. My mother stood in the corner, silent as a statue, arms wrapped around herself, avoiding my gaze. I had known this moment was coming. I just hadn't expected it to happen so soon or so brutally. We had been arguing about my future for months, maybe even years. He wanted me to follow in his footsteps, to wear suits, sign contracts, and shake hands with people whose smiles never reached their eyes. I wanted something else. I wanted to fight not in the metaphorical sense, not in a courtroom or a boardroom. I wanted to fight in a ring, fists up, sweat dripping, pain and glory entwined. I wanted to be a boxer. He had called it childish. A waste of time. An embarrassment. You think you can make a living punching people? He scoffed at dinner that night. You'll end up broke, brain damaged, and forgotten. Is that what you want? To ruin yourself? It's not about money, I shot back. It's about what I love. What I'm good at. You're good at nothing, he spat, his face darkening. You've wasted enough time on this nonsense. You're coming to work for me on Monday. End of discussion. But it wasn't the end. Not for me. I'm not working for you, I said, standing up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. I'm going to train. I'm going to fight. That was it. That was the moment the fragile thread holding our relationship together snapped. He stood up too, and for a moment, I thought he might hit me. Instead, he pointed at the door. Get out. And don't come back. It took me a second to realize he wasn't joking. I looked at my mother, silently pleading for her to say something. She just turned away. You're serious? I asked, my voice quieter now. I don't have time for failures in this house, he said. You made your choice. Now live with it. And just like that, I was on the street. I didn't take much. Just my gym bag, some clothes, and a couple of dollars in my pocket. The night air was colder than I expected, or maybe I was just numb from shock. I stood outside our big, polished house, staring at the door that had just slammed shut behind me. No home. No money. No backup plan. But I had my dream. And that had to be enough. The first night was the hardest. I sat on a bench outside a gas station, gym bag at my feet, staring at the few crumpled bills in my hand. Not enough for a motel. Barely enough for food. I thought about going back, swallowing my pride, apologizing. But I knew my father, he didn't give second chances. If I stepped back into that house, it would be as his shadow, his puppet. I couldn't do it. Instead, I spent the night in the park, using my gym bag as a pillow. I barely slept. The hunger was already setting in, gnawing at my stomach. My mind raced with thoughts of what came next. I had no plan, no safety net. But I had one place left to go. The gym. Coach Martinez wasn't exactly thrilled to see me when I showed up the next morning. You look like hell, he said, arms crossed, watching me warily. Didn't sleep much, I admitted. Why? I hesitated. My dad kicked me out. Martinez sighed, rubbing his face. He was an old-school trainer, built like a brick wall, and always wore the same worn-out tracksuit. He had trained dozens of fighters, some of them champions, most of them nobodies. He never sugarcoated anything. You're 16, kid, he said. Where the hell you gonna stay? I shrugged. I don't know. I need to train. I'll figure out the rest later. He studied me for a long time, then sighed. You're serious about this, aren't you? Yes. Fine, he grumbled. You can sleep in the back for now. But you work for it. Clean the gym, mop the floors, do whatever needs doing. You don't slack, You don't complain. You stop showing up, you're out. Relief flooded through me. It wasn't much, but it was something. That day, I trained like my life depended on it because it did. First blood. Training was hell. I thought I was tough before, but Martinez broke me. Morning runs that left my legs shaking. Drills that made my lungs burn. Sparring sessions where I got my ass handed to me over and over again. One afternoon, I stepped into the ring with a guy named Rico, a scrappy, seasoned amateur with a wicked left hook. The second I dropped my hands, he punished me for it. Crack! His fist slammed into my nose, and blood sprayed everywhere. My vision blurred. Pain shot through my face. Cover up, damn it! Martinez barked from outside the ring. But I couldn't. I was too slow. Rico didn't stop. A right cross to my jaw, a body shot that stole the air from my lungs. I hit the canvas, gasping. The gym went silent. I could see Martinez staring at me, waiting to see what I'd do. Was I going to stay down? Give up? Walk away? I wiped the blood from my nose, forced myself to my feet, and raised my fists. Again, I muttered. Martinez grinned. That's when I knew I belonged there. The fights begin. It took a year before I had my first amateur fight. A small event, nothing fancy. But for me, it was everything. I was up against another young fighter, a kid who had a solid record and more experience than me. I stepped into the ring, heart pounding, hands wrapped tight. The bell rang. We clashed immediately, fast jabs, dodging, countering. My opponent was good, but I was hungrier. Every punch I threw had weight behind it. Every hit I took, I shook off. Second round, I caught him with a clean right hook. His legs buckled. He went down. I won. It wasn't just a fight. It was proof. Proof that I wasn't crazy. Proof that I could do this. Martinez patted my shoulder afterward. Not bad, kid, he said. That was the closest thing to a compliment he ever gave. That first win led to another, and another. I was still sleeping in the back of the gym, still struggling, still barely scraping by, but I was winning. I didn't need my father's money. I didn't need his approval. I was going to make it on my own. No matter what. I was 22 when I got the call. By then, I wasn't just some kid fighting in small-town gyms anymore. I had a professional record, knockouts under my belt, and my name was starting to mean something. People were talking. Promoters were noticing. I had crawled my way up from nothing, and now, for the first time, the dream didn't seem so far away. Then, out of nowhere, my father called me. At first, I thought it was a mistake. My phone buzzed, and when I saw his name, I actually just stared at the screen for a moment. 6 years. 6 damn years of silence, and suddenly, here he was? Curiosity got the best of me. I answered. Hello? A pause. Then, his voice. It's been a long time. He sounded older. Stiffer. But still him. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. Finally, he sighed. Listen. I was thinking we should talk. In person. I let out a short laugh. Oh yeah? Took you 6 years to decide that? He ignored my sarcasm. Are you free tomorrow? I should have said no. I wanted to say no. But a small part of me, the part that still remembered being a kid who wanted his dad to be proud of him, wouldn't let me. Fine, I said. The meeting. We met at some fancy restaurant downtown. The kind of place where guys in suits sip expensive wine and act like they own the world. It was the kind of place my father had always belonged to, and the kind of place I never had. When I walked in, I saw him immediately. He was sitting at a table near the window, wearing an expensive suit, sipping a drink like he didn't have a care in the world. He looked up, saw me, and for a split second, I thought I saw surprise in his eyes. I guess I didn't look like the 16-year-old kid he threw out anymore. I had changed. Broad shoulders. Scarred knuckles. A face hardened by years of training, by pain, by fighting for everything I had. I sat down across from him, leaning back in my chair. "All right," I said. "Talk." He smiled. That fake businessman smile. "You look well." "No thanks to you." His smile faltered for half a second, but he recovered. "I've been following your career," he said. "You've made quite a name for yourself." I crossed my arms. "And?" He sighed, setting down his drink. "Look. I know we had our differences. But I was trying to do what was best for you. I wanted you to have stability, success. I didn't want you to waste your life on some reckless." He stopped himself, forcing a smile. "But I see now that you've made something of yourself. And I'm proud of you." Bullshit. Every word, every damn word, was rehearsed. I could see it. He wasn't proud of me. He was proud of what I had become. "I was thinking," he continued, "that maybe it's time we rebuild our relationship. I have connections, sponsors. I can help you. Guide you through the business side of things." And there it was. The real reason he called. He didn't want a son. He wanted an investment. I leaned forward, locking eyes with him. "Where were you when I was sleeping in a gym?" I asked. "Where were you when I was starving? When I was getting my face bashed in, night after night, just trying to survive?" His jaw clenched, but he didn't answer. I let the silence hang between us before shaking my head. "You only care now because I'm worth something." "That's not true," he said quickly. Too quickly. I stood up. "Enjoy your drink." He grabbed my wrist before I could leave. His grip was tight. Desperate. "Wait," he said, voice lower now. "At least think about it." I stared at his hand, then at him. He had never looked weaker to me. I pulled my wrist free and walked away. But this wasn't over. Not yet. I should have just walked away. I tried to. I told myself he wasn't worth it, that I had survived without him for 6 years and didn't need to prove anything. But the more I thought about it, the more it burned. He had thrown me away. Called me a failure. Left me to starve. Now that I was something, now that I had clawed my way to success with my own hands, he wanted to pretend none of it happened? He wanted to shake my hand, play the proud father, and take credit for what I had become? No. He didn't get to walk back into my life like that. If he wanted to be part of my world, I'd let him. But on my terms. Setting the trap. I didn't reach out right away. I made him wait. Let him sweat. And sure enough, a week later, he called again. "I've been thinking about our conversation," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Maybe you're right. Maybe we should rebuild." He sounded relieved. Almost too relieved. "I'm glad to hear that." We met again, but this time, I let him believe he had the upper hand. I let him play the role of the wise businessman, the experienced mentor. He talked about opportunities, about deals, about how together we could take my career to the next level. I nodded. Listened. Let him feel in control. Then, I gave him exactly what he wanted. "I have a big fight coming up," I said. "High stakes. Big money. It's the perfect time to bring you in." I could see the greed light up in his eyes. "Smart move," he said. "Yeah. For me. The sponsorship deal." The fight was already locked in, a title eliminator. Win, and I'd get my shot at the belt. The money was big, the press was bigger, and every promoter in the game wanted a piece of it. That's when I made my move. I introduced my father to some of the sharks in the business. Told him I wanted him to handle negotiations. Let him play the role of the father manager, the man guiding his son to greatness. Behind the scenes, I made sure he got just enough control to feel important but not enough to actually have power. And then, when the time was right, I let him make a deal. A bad deal. He thought he was being clever. Thought he was locking me into a sponsorship agreement that would benefit him more than me. A contract that would tie me down for years, ensuring that every dollar I made would funnel through him first. But he forgot something. I wasn't a 16-year-old kid anymore. The fall. The day before the fight, I sat across from him as he handed me the final contract. "This will set you up for life," he said smoothly. "It's the right move." I smiled. So did the lawyer sitting next to me? He frowned. "Who's this?" "My legal team," I said, flipping through the contract. "See, I had a feeling you'd try something like this. So I had a few people look it over." His face dropped. I turned to my lawyer. "Would you like to explain?" The lawyer adjusted his glasses and leaned forward. "This contract is designed to heavily favor your father. It gives him majority financial control over all your future fights, endorsements, and earnings for the next 10 years. Additionally, there are clauses that—" "That's enough," I said, cutting him off. I turned back to my father. "You weren't trying to help me. You were trying to own me." He swallowed hard. "It's not like that." I shoved the contract back at him. "I don't need your deals. I don't need your help. And I sure as hell don't need you." Then, I dropped the hammer. I pulled out my own contract, one I had drawn up weeks before. "This is what's actually happening," I said. "You're going to sign a document legally stating you have no rights to my career, no claims to my earnings, and no influence over my contracts. You get nothing from me." His face turned red. "You think you can?" I leaned in. "I don't think. I know. If you don't sign it, I'll make sure the world knows exactly what kind of man you are. I'll drag your name through the mud so hard that even the snakes in your business won't want to work with you." His hands clenched into fists. "You wouldn't." I smiled. "Try me." The end of his control. He signed. He didn't have a choice. And when I walked out of that meeting, I felt nothing. No guilt. No regret. Just satisfaction. Because for the first time, I wasn't just winning in the ring. I had beaten him, too. The night I won the championship, my father called me again. I didn't answer. I was standing in the locker room, championship belt resting on my lap, knuckles bruised and swollen. The fight had been a war, 12 brutal rounds, blood, sweat, and exhaustion. But I had done it. I was the world champion now. And he had watched it all from the crowd. I knew he'd be there. The cameras had caught him ringside, clapping like a proud father, like he had been part of this journey, like he had built me. It made me sick. Now, as I sat there, staring at his name on my phone screen, I thought about what I wanted. Closure? Revenge? Or just to finally say what I should have said years ago? I exhaled and answered. Silence on the other end. Then, his voice. "Son." I cut him off. "We're not doing this." He hesitated. "I just wanted to say, congratulations. I knew you could do it." I laughed. A bitter, hollow sound. "No, you didn't." "Come on," he said, his tone careful now. "I was hard on you, but it was because I wanted you to be strong. And look at you now. You wouldn't be here if it wasn't for me." I gritted my teeth. "You threw me away." His sigh was heavy, forced. "I made mistakes. But we're family. And family should stick together. Maybe it's time we let the past go." "Let the past go?" I repeated. "You mean the part where I was homeless? Or the part where you tried to control me again the second I became valuable?" He ignored that. "Listen. You're a champion now. And with the right guidance, you could go even further. I have connections, deals lined up. There it was. He still didn't see me as a son. Just an asset. I smiled, shaking my head. You don't get it, do you? He went silent. I didn't win this because of you, I said, my voice steady. I won in spite of you. He exhaled sharply. You're being stubborn. No, I said. I just finally see you for what you are. Silence. Then, his last attempt. We don't have to be enemies. I thought about that. Then I thought about the years of struggle, the nights I went to bed hungry, the fights I barely survived. And I thought about Martinez, the man who had taken me in when my own father threw me out. The man who never expected anything from me except effort. I already had a father. And it wasn't him. We're not enemies, I said finally. We're nothing. And I hung up. I stared at my phone for a long time, waiting to feel something: regret, sadness. But I didn't. I had already won. I stood in the center of the ring, the championship belt draped over my shoulder, cameras flashing, the roar of the crowd still echoing in my ears. My body ached, my face was swollen, and my knuckles felt like they were on fire. But none of it mattered. I had done it. I had won. Not just the fight. Not just the belt. I had won my life back. What strength really means. After the press conference, I found myself alone in the locker room, staring at my reflection in the mirror. The kid who had been thrown out at 16 was gone. In his place was a fighter, a champion, a man who had built himself from nothing. And for the first time in my life, I truly understood what strength meant. Strength wasn't just about power, or money, or fame. It was about never breaking, no matter how much the world tried to break me. It was about the nights I went to bed hungry but still showed up to train the next morning. It was about every hit I took and every time I got back up. It was about never letting someone else define my worth. My father had called me weak. A failure. He had thrown me out like I was nothing. And now, he was nothing to me. A real father. I left the arena that night and went straight to the gym. The same gym that had saved my life all those years ago. The place where it had all started. Martinez was there, as always, wiping down the ring, just another night to him. He glanced up when I walked in, raising an eyebrow. No party, he asked. I smirked. Not my style. He nodded, like that answer made sense. And it did to him, at least. I set the belt down on a nearby bench. I wanted to say thanks. He scoffed. For what? I didn't win that fight for you. I shook my head. Not just for the fight. For everything. Martinez was never a sentimental man, but for a moment, I saw something in his expression: pride, maybe. Then he smirked. You finally got some sense in that thick skull of yours. I chuckled. Took me long enough. He grabbed his bag, slinging it over his shoulder. You know, just because you're a champ now doesn't mean you get to slack off. I rolled my eyes. I know. Good, he said. Then, before walking out the door, he paused. See you tomorrow, kid. He didn't say it outright, but I knew what he meant. I already had a father. And it wasn't the man who left me behind, it was the one who had been there when I needed him most. The legacy I choose. That night, I sat in the empty gym, staring at the championship belt. I had spent years fighting for respect, for recognition, for something to prove to the world. But now, I realized I had nothing left to prove. Not to my father. Not to anyone. I wasn't fighting for revenge anymore. I was fighting for me. For the 16-year-old kid who had nothing but a dream. For the people who believed in me when no one else did. For every fighter out there who had been told they'd never make it. My father had his legacy: money, power, empty deals. And me? I had mine. One forged in blood, sweat, and fists. One that I built with my own 2 hands. And no one, not my father, not the world, could ever take that away from me.